Employer feedback. It's not something we usually like to receive, as it normally entails a recruiter telling us we haven't got the job. But rather than enter into a saddened stupor upon receiving this bad news, how can we use it to our advantage? By the end of this lesson, you'll have learned how to get useful feedback from employers and then turn that feedback into something that can support your placement search and ultimately lead to success. So how do you go about getting feedback? Well, at least at the late stages of the application process, when you've got to an interview or an assessment centre, an employer will tell you either by phone or via email if you were unfortunately unsuccessful in your application. They might provide a bit of feedback there and then, but more likely you'll have to ask for feedback in order to get it. Now, asking for feedback isn't easy. No one likes to hear about what they did wrong. But here's something really important to remember when you have an unsuccessful application for a placement role. Most reasons for rejection are not about you. It might be that another candidate had way more experience or that they expressed themselves more clearly at interview. But unless we ask for feedback, we'll never know. So how can you ask? Well, it's important to remain professional and to think intelligently about how to phrase your request. Certainly don't challenge the recruiter. Asking, "What did I do wrong?" or "Why wasn't I selected?" is too accusatory and assertive. It's more polite and potentially more constructive to ask, "What can I do next time to improve?" Now, there's no automatic right to feedback. You won't get it every time. But when you do get it, it's rare, and so you should treat it like gold. So what should you do with the feedback when it is received? Well, often our first reaction to feedback is to dismiss it. How can they think that? They only saw me for 20 minutes. But it's important to remember that future interviews and assessment centres will be assessed in the same way, so any steps you can take to improve, even if only for your next recruiter, will help you out in the future. So first, you should record your feedback, write it down, and then reflect on it, using the skills you developed earlier on in your placement preparation. What does this feedback mean? Does it surprise you? If so, what aspects of it are surprising? Or perhaps, on reflection, you think it accurately describes your performance. If so, what could you plan for next time to help avoid the same issue? Talking with your placement advisor or a friend can help you here. The most common, and perhaps the least useful, feedback received is simply that the employer chose another candidate with a greater amount of experience than you. This is one piece of feedback that you have little control over, but there are reasons to be positive when you get this sort of feedback. It probably relates to a very particular role that probably won't be the case next time around. They interviewed you, remember, so they're clearly interested in you. Another common piece of feedback is that at interview your examples were too long. Now, you should think carefully about how to respond to this feedback during your next interview. So it sounds like you should cut down your answers, but which part of them? Can you remember if you perhaps strayed off topic? In which case, next time, think about your answer before starting it. Or, if using the STAR method, perhaps you spent too long describing the situation you were presented with, and not enough time describing what actions you took. Reflecting on feedback in this way is really important so that you don't misinterpret it and end up weakening your technique. Next common bit of feedback? You appeared very nervous in your presentation. Well, yeah, lots of people appear nervous in presentations, but what could you do to make it better next time? Well, think about why you felt nervous. Is it because you were perhaps unprepared? In which case, prepare more next time. Perhaps it was simply because you really cared about it and wanted that job, in which case you might want to consider using breathing techniques in order to control your nerves. You weren't enthusiastic enough, another frequently received bit of feedback, and this one's easy to fall into. It's an interview situation, and so it's formal, right? Well, yes, to a certain extent, but that doesn't mean you have to be really reserved. It means things like not calling people mate and dressing smartly. You still need to come across as a person that's enthusiastic about this job. Simply smiling during a job interview can really help make you appear more enthusiastic, and it might help you relax too. So that's a few common bits of feedback. What feedback you do get will, hopefully, be targeted at you, and so it's important to reflect on your feedback individually, as we have so far. Now, most of these examples only really apply once you've got to the interview stage, and for the large multinationals, you'll only really ever get feedback, if you do at all, at this late stage. But if you make an application with a smaller organisation, which is unsuccessful at an earlier stage, perhaps you don't hear back from them, then it's a good idea to ask them for feedback, as they're perhaps more likely to respond. So, employer feedback. Not something we normally like to receive, but something that can be really useful if we do the right thing with it. And so, for the discussion, what's the worst bit of feedback you've ever received? And the best? What feedback do you think someone might give you in the future? And how can you address that now? Join the comments.